ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from NASCAR.info coming at you after the conclusion of the Firekeepers Casino 400 at the Michigan International Speedway, where unofficially Kevin Harvick has now scored his first Cup win of the season, his first in more than a year. I believe they said about 600 days since his last win at Bristol in 2020, and has now put himself firmly into playoff contention and has now left just one position left over for any winless driver to make their way into the playoffs. That driver being bumped out fourth in the overall points, Martin Truex Jr. now has his work cut out for him. Fortunately, at two of the next three races coming up, he should be one to watch, certainly at Richmond with his recent improvement in the short tracks, and of course at Watkins Glen with how good he's been at the road courses before Chase Elliott got his feet under him. So I think it's going to be a very interesting couple of weeks coming up. But before we get to any of that, we got to certainly talk about what was happening from the race today. Kevin Harvick pulling off the victory. Bubba Wallace in a very close second, at least close in the rankings here, came up 2.903 seconds at the end. Had about a 4 to 5 second deficit that was kind of chipping away at the end, but unfortunately not much closer than that. But still a fine weekend for Bubba this weekend with the pole. I know that the interview that he had in the post race was just shown here. I think he was definitely playing, being a bit too hard on himself for the outcome of the race being what it was. I think this was a fine weekend for him. I think second stings more than any other position, I think, for these drivers, as competitive as they are. And with the playoff still very much in his mind, too, knowing that he has to win his way in. I know that was an opportunity that, he's going to be very critical about. But again, I think there's the string of strong runs he's had these last few weeks. Whether or not it's going to be enough to get him into the playoffs, I think there's a lot of positives he can look at going forward here. So, but again, emotions are raw, and the point system is set up in such a way that I think it makes these situations even worse from one position or another. But overall, I think both he and Harvick and the other competitors in the field really put on quite the show at Michigan. I think this track has steadily been improving again the last couple of years, getting the surface war in, and certainly the next gen car, I think, really distinguished itself in this one. We saw a lot of comers and goers in this race. We saw a lot of drivers that really seemed like they had this race in their back pocket. The Trackhouse effort was looking really good between both Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez, both of them being very much factors in this race. Then you had the situation with Christopher Bell and the Joe Gibbs efforts. Christopher Bell right up there, unfortunately gets involved in an incident on the front straightaway with Chastain. Seemed like he just came up into the one car. I mean, I'm not sure what else was going on in that case there, but the result was the same. Some significant damage to the right front of Christopher's car and taking him out of the race. Other drivers that fell out that seemed like they had strong runs early. Tyler Reddick, looking to get his second win in a row, did not come to pass, had a cylinder drop at one point and ended up pulling off the track, so he didn't oil down the speedway there. Very poor finish for him. Not quite as poor as the drivers that were involved in the day's biggest accident on lap 25. A massive pile up on the lap 25 restart there after the competition caution. You had about 13 cars stay out on old tires with strategy coming into play. You would anticipate ordinarily that you'd have a competition caution. Everybody would come in and check tires. But unfortunately, when you have the slowest cars that stayed out versus the fastest cars that got 4 tires or fuel only in the case of Michael McDowell, you had a situation where the field just knotted up at the moment that the pileup happened. Heartbreaker for J.J. Yaley. I know he's going to get entirely too much frustrations aimed his direction there. But unfortunately, the replay did show the 15 car washing up the track there in front of McDowell. They fell back into a pileup of about 4 cars, 4 wide there, including Austin Cindric. And then it just became a huge mess from there. And it's unfortunate. It kind of reminds me of some of the situations you used to have where drivers would be the tail end of the lead lap and start in front of the leaders on a restart. There was a very big pile up at Dover, kind of reminded me of, that ended up collecting a lot of cars in that one. But this one, very much the same outcome, including a very hard hit out of Austin Cindric there, hitting the outside wall. Good to see him get out of the car under his own power, but a brutal collision with the outside wall. Seemed to even move the underside of the safer barrier at the impact, but good to see him get out of the car. But unfortunately, unofficially, pending the results of post-race technical inspection, the second last place finish of Cindric's career, his first since Dover earlier this year when the crash clock expired on him in that one. A couple other drivers looking to get past the crash clock in that incident. Both the Front Row Motorsports teammates were able to get through that. However, both of them were well off the pace. I really thought that at the end of this race that probably one of them was going to be a problem. It seemed like one of these drivers was going to run over them at just exactly the wrong moment there. But luckily, both of them able to stay out of the leader's way, weren't a factor in the outcome of the race, and finished many laps down. I believe they were both about 10 laps down at the finish of the race there. Other drivers, Harrison Burton's crew was trying to replace the tow link after the big accident. They were just about cleared. They had about 15 seconds left on their crash clock. Unfortunately, it expired on them, and they had to go back behind the wall. Kyle Busch, very unhappy, understandably, after trying just doing what he was going to do, coming down, for the competition caution, having his pit stop completed, came back out there, found himself right in the middle of an absolute storm there in the first corner, and resulting in a very large accident at that point there. Several other drivers involved in it as well. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. among them. And of course, Yaley mentioned earlier, but that ended up having a fairly open and shut last place battle there. Up to that point, it seemed like BJ McLeod was going to be in that position. He was falling back from Yaley at the tail end of the field there. It lost, I believe, about 2 or 3 seconds before the competition yellow came out. But ultimately, he actually almost finished on the lead lap with the attrition being the way that it was. McLeod staying on the lead lap till about 10 laps to go when Kevin Harvick got around him there. Josh Bilicki and Cody Ware also trying to hang on there at the finish of this race. Actually, looking at the results here, both Ware and Bilicki did finish on the lead lap just in front of the leaders. 39.23 seconds back was Ware, and 38.573 seconds back was Bilicki. Chase Briscoe, Corey LaJoie, other drivers further back in the lineup there as well. We also saw a little bit of a preview of things to come during the middle stages of this race, about lap 70 or 77 thereabouts. Both Noah Gragson and Ty Gibbs were having good runs. I know a bit of strategy played in, especially with fuel mileage and tire strategy, as it always seems to at this track. But it was good to see the both of them up there, not really racing each other directly, but still good to see them back up there. I know that both drivers have their share of detractors, but again, it's only a matter of time till both of them get in the Cup Series on a regular basis. And I think at that point, we're going to start seeing some battles between them, and these other regulars are going to have to really deal with them. In today's case, however, it didn't come to pass. Ty Gibbs had a pit road penalty with about 30 laps to go that dropped him back in the order. However, he was able to recover and finish in the 10th position. Yet another fantastic run out of his unexpected start to the Cup Series this year, and taking over for Kurt Busch. Kurt's still expecting that he's going to be coming back at Richmond next week, where he was the defending last place finisher of the September race at Richmond, hoping for certainly much better than that this time around. But Ty Gibbs in the 10th position. Noah Gragson with an incident off of turn 2. Certainly a toe link situation as the car was driving diagonally onto pit road, and ended up with him very well back in the order, showing in the 30th position there, right behind Tyler Reddick and ahead of Cole Custer. Custer with his own bit of a situation there too, with a fire out of the left front wheel after a flat tire coming off of turn 2, the second straight week that we've had a bit of a fire coming from one of these cars. But in this particular case, Custer, unlike Chris Buescher last week, hopping out of the car and the team having to extinguish the flames there in this case, did not come back out in the race and finished in the 31st position after completing 94 laps in this case. I'm still going to be interested to see what NASCAR's policy on fires in the cockpit, or fires in general, are going to be. On the one hand, you had both what happened with Custer today and Spencer Boyd at IRP just a couple weeks ago, where the driver gets out of the car or truck in Boyd's case, and they end up out of the race. Whereas Chris Buescher's situation, apparently later tweets from this week from Buescher himself indicated that he was just very happy with that car, that he was determined to get a good run out of it, and fire or none, or extinguisher or none, came back out there and actually still had a decent finish there. As incredible as that performance was, I think that's still a little bit concerning, at least in terms of consistency with the fire extinguishing policy. I also hope that we get a little bit more of a clarification as to how these fires happen with these different teams out there. I know that a lot has been talked about with the rocker box or the rocker panel, how exactly those cause fires, how they maybe interact with the door foam. I know the foam was kind of raised as an issue last week in Indianapolis. Didn't seem like that was the same case here Michigan today. I applaud again Steve Letarte for trying to explain it there, but I was disappointed they didn't have a graphic ready for it, or anything that they could kind of help explain it, especially since they seem to show the toe link graphic just about every single week. They really need to kind of work on something like that, because I don't think we're getting still that transparency we need to understand how this car fails, really, and how this car, responds to certain impacts. We're well past halfway through the season, and I think at this point we should have kind of a lot more evidence that we can actually discuss a lot of these particular incidents from one to the other. But regardless, good to see Custer get out of the car okay. Good to see that it wasn't anything more serious than that in this particular case. But very high attrition in this race. I believe I'm only seeing 28 cars finishing the race under power. Again, Gilliland 12 laps down and McDowell 13 laps down after their involvement in the lap 25 incident. But other drivers well back there in the lineup. Daniel Suarez had a flat tire with about 5 laps to go. Looked like he was going to force the race to have a late race caution. But I applaud NASCAR for showing some restraint in that situation, where they really were just having the race play out as naturally as they could. I felt that we saw a lot of good green flag racing today, very competitive today. It reminded me a lot of course, Fontana being the sister track earlier, this year, way back in February when the teams were just figuring out these cars in general. I think the race was more competitive. We didn't see cars really get stranded out there the way we did at Fontana. So cars were able to get back to pit road. Even Custer's case with the dramatic situation that happened with him. I think it was a positive indicator of some things that these teams and perhaps NASCAR themselves have figured out really since then. So I think that's a lot of good to look at too. Austin Hill finishing his first Cup Series race under power and on the lead lap in the 18th position. First race for Richard Childress's expansion team, their number 33 car, since the 2015 Homestead race, where I believe Ty Dillon was driving it at the time. Good to see Hill get a good performance out here. He's kind of blindsided me this year. I know that he had some good runs for Motorsports Business Management, where Shiggy Hattori and Carl Long were sharing that 61 car, and Hill seemed to get the added backing and get some great runs of the 61 car a couple of years ago. But it still surprised me how well he's made the transition in the Xfinity Series, wins at Daytona and Atlanta, and now getting the opportunity in this Cup race. And other than that minor skirmish on pit road where he did run in the back of Cody Ware, still getting a great finish there out of the number 33 car, ahead of a lot of drivers that just really were having trouble finishing the race. And that was definitely a big thing to really talk about from this one. But again, all of this really secondary to Kevin Harvick and the win. I know we just touched on that very briefly at the beginning here, but that's absolutely tremendous for him. I think that there's been so much pressure and so much speculation about which veterans may or may not be retiring, which drivers may or may not be making the playoffs. We're getting down to the closing weeks of this. Stewart-Haas Racing gets their only win this year way back at Phoenix with Chase Briscoe. And other than that, I mean, Harvick hasn't really had as rough of a season. I think drivers like Truex and Kyle Busch could be argued that they've kind of really had a really difficult season, in spite of the fact that Kyle Busch has won and Truex is still at least on the outside of playoff contention still at this point. But Harvick, again, as he said in his interview, those that thought that they were struggling really didn't know, about them, that they were really having the consistent speed that they needed to win, just not the right luck. And things certainly fell into place for him today to really get up there. And it was interesting, again, you see a lot of the drivers, there were a lot of the big names this year that, again, have been factors from one week to the next, especially in recent weeks. And one by one, all of them falling out to the point where Harvick was just the last survivor there and coming out, at the same time that he could there at the end of the race. Again, it's not to say that he had an easy time of it, certainly. The pole winner and Bubba Wallace and Joey Logano having a fine run, and Denny Hamlin seemed like he was a threat the entire day in the top 5, trying to get something going. Unfortunately, some pit miscues were certainly a big problem for him, as they were with Kyle Larson, showing how important that other half of it is, that these teams have to be perfect on pit road. And Michigan is a track that definitely punishes that when you are not perfect out there. That gap that could be, maybe a second becomes 2 or 3 seconds, and pretty soon you're just not a factor at all in trying to go for the lead there. And Harvick, being such a consistent winner there, it was interesting seeing the booth trying to kind of get their feet back under them. and indicate that they actually, believe that he could do it. And, oh yeah, sure. All the people in the broadcast booth picked Toyotas to win the race. They picked every Toyota except for Ty Gibbs. So I think they clearly had a different view of it. And certainly with, drivers like Chase Elliott, who have had a lot of momentum coming into this race, looking at him too. But Michigan has, and continues to be after today, always been a track that the Fords seem to have some kind of advantage on. I know people want to bury put a lot of dirt on these Fords for not being, up to pace, at least in terms of a win total. Certainly a lot of this being brought about from the executive that came out last week and was saying that they were disappointed in the fact that they weren't more competitive, at least in their win total this year. But Michigan is a track that they've always had in their back pocket, has been for years, all the way back with Davey Allison and Dale Jarrett going for the win here in 1991. Or, other drivers that worked their way up there, guys like Jeff Burton himself, who's in the booth now, being a consistent driver, trying to get up there and get some good runs here. Jack Roush seemed to pretty much have the keys to this track there, especially with Mark Martin and all of his wins up here. So, again, and I know the next gen car is different in many ways, but Ford always seems to have this place figured out. And in this case here, once again, they had to actually be there at the finish and pull off the victory. So a tremendous effort for Harvick. Good to see, another veteran get up there. And again, good to see a good race, good, clean, competitive race. There were, I guess not clean maybe isn't the best term to put at, because of course we did have a series of accidents out there, but it was mostly just, again, situations on restarts. Again, maybe people just coming off pit road in case of the Christopher Bell situation. But a lot of the green flag racing, I think, was very competitive and very compelling. At one point, having about 4 or 5 drivers that were up there when Daniel Suarez and Ross Chastain were leading, with Christopher Bell and Denny Hamlin behind, seemed to have very equally matched cars. And it was certainly good to see. I think that looking at different tracks that this car has excelled on, and thinking about, how well it does on road courses, again, the 1.5 miles, and I think it can now be argued the 2-mile tracks between both Fontana and the Michigan track today, really putting on a good show. So I think that's certainly something positive to look at too. I was a bit disappointed by the lack of a bit of professionalism in the booth, where they were absolutely going for Bubba Wallace to try to win the race. And again, this is nothing against Wallace, because, he didn't have anything to do with it. But the booth, it couldn't made it more obvious that they were going for a caution there at the end of the race. What happened to just having a natural conclusion to a race? Okay, yeah, the leader is leading by 4 seconds. That should be viewed as a positive thing. I think that there's a cultural issue in the sport where suddenly a big lead is viewed negatively, or some driver that's dominating is viewed negatively. And maybe part of that is a consequence of Jimmy Johnson's dominance for the championship. I don't know exactly what it is, but Harvick absolutely earned that big lead that he was building up there. And it should have been more, the approach should have been much more of like, wow, he's really determined to make the playoffs. He's really determined to get this win. If you have to use it within the framework of drivers trying to race their way in or not, I don't think we needed a restart to make this compelling. It was compelling enough seeing Harvick, and if he could actually kind of finish this off, given how close he'd been to wins before. And again, you could have had a late race restart in this situation. Maybe it's one where both Harvick and Wallace didn't win, or maybe one or the other, either take each other out or fall back in the lineup and finish 20th. Would that have been any better of a situation? I don't think so. But again, I know the tensions are high, that Bubba Wallace is, again, in that group of drivers now that really has to win and make their way in, but faces a very much an uphill climb with 3 very different tracks coming up between Richmond, Watkins Glen, and Daytona. Now, of course, Bubba, finished second in the Daytona 500 this year. I know that's going to be a venue that he's going to be looking ahead to, but as the broadcasters were saying earlier, and I think they were right to point this out, you can't count on winning Daytona, because anything can happen, of course. And look at so much that happened during the Daytona 500 this year with Austin Cindric pulling off the win. I think that, I as much as I like having Daytona be the cutoff race, because I think if you are counting on Daytona to win and make yourself into the playoffs, you're probably not going to be somebody that's going to be competing for the championship, because you're generally going to be somebody that, again, those are the people that are winning and, racking up their wins and working on that consistency to get through the first couple of rounds. So I think that's kind of what that's the measure of there. But I know for Wallace himself, though, Richmond and Watkins Glen, he's probably thinking, yeah, that's going to be a real challenge coming up. But again, it's such a competitive season this year. I mean, every race matters in one position or another there. And he's going to have to, figure it out just like any of the other competitors there. But again, I still do think he's being a bit too hard on himself there. I know he's been very public on the subject of depression and what he's dealt with in his own career. But again, I think he's really distinguished himself the last few weeks, and that needs to be really factored in. I think if anything else, it's really also another way to say that, again, a single season championship is something that's still to be preferred. And having the singularity of trying to win a race just for winning the race, not for, making the playoffs or anything. Just have that still be central to it. And, okay, maybe you don't win this race, but you don't have to win these next two. Maybe your next win comes up sometime during the traditional playoffs and you pull off, say, like a Kansas or a Texas or something like that. You still have those opportunities coming up there. But the dynamic of this playoff system doesn't allow for that. And I think that's unfortunate. But I think that's another thing to kind of look at there too. But again, great run for Harvick, pulling off the victory there. But a lot of teams really struggling there for sure. And you had other drivers that were able to kind of really come back from a lot of issues. Kyle Larson and Ty Gibbs from their situations on pit road, finishing in the 7th and 10th positions there. Alex Bowman with a terrible qualifying run, getting back up into the 9th position. Again, this is the kind of race that I think is more entertaining, really, in a more traditional sense, that you really do have drivers that are good at different phases of the race, and eventually getting to a point where, the top guys that are up there are the ones you'd expect to be up there, and they're actually contending for the victory. And sometimes that victory is going to be by multiple seconds, but I think that's really something that I hope doesn't get I hope that's not the approach to this race here, is that it's viewed in any way as a bad race just because of the margin of victory, because a whole heck of a lot had to happen for that even to be a possibility there at the finish there too. So it's a difficult situation for a lot of these drivers put in here. I think in a regular season race, I think this would have been plenty enough entertaining for that too. But again, things are always going to be colored by the way that the playoffs play out here at the same time. But congratulations to Harvick again. I think that's a tremendous victory for him. And certainly, as much as I know that he makes it seem like pressure doesn't get to him, I'm sure he's now thinking, much like, what the commentators were talking about at the finish. He's got that top 10 streak at Phoenix he's coming up on. Now he doesn't even really have to worry about like trying to get into the playoffs, and he can think about that race well ahead of it. Now, hopefully he doesn't overdrive his headlights like he did in 2020 and ends up in a situation where he gets eliminated in the penultimate round there. But that's still further down the line, and he can figure things out at that point. So certainly, again, I think overall, good hard racing out there, and really, I really think generally it was pretty enjoyable. On the subject of the broadcast booth too, I was very pleased with the increased use of Brad Daugherty in the booth, especially in the Xfinity Series race, and a little bit in the Cup race today when he was working from pit road. I thought he made the play-by-play really, really engaging, and that was really good to see. I still think that in the booth today in the Cup race, with the current lineup with Steve Letarte, Dale Jr., and Jeff Burton, honestly, I felt like it was a little bit easier to kind of tune it out a little bit. It felt like, again, that even with 3 people in the booth, they're still trying to fill every moment of airtime with saying something, whether they're asking each other questions or just commenting on what strategy is playing out. And then maybe a little bit of play-by-play in there with all 3 of them trying their hand at it. It's still a little bit disorganized. It is much better, certainly, than having 4 people in the booth. And I think NBC's right to try this out. But I think, again, there needs to be a little bit of clarity of purpose and a little bit more distinguished voices between the 3 people in the booth. And I think Brad Daugherty in the Saturday race, I think really did a fine job of that, and actually kind of, when something exciting happened, and it wasn't obsequious excitement, kind of like what Michael Waltrip does in the booth, where he's constantly saying like, oh, this is gonna be the most amazing race ever. Isn't this going to be incredible? They look at all the people here, they're having incredible, and like nothing's happened yet. Like it was actually responding to things when they happened. And Brad Daugherty's not new to this, of course. He was great at this back when he was at ESPN and working with Rusty Wallace and the folks back then. And that was at a time where the ESPN broadcasts, frankly, weren't very good back then, which is unfortunate given the talent that they had there at the same time. But I think that really, if they can get an increased role for Brad in there and try him in the 3-person lineup for the Cup races, I think that would be really exciting. I think he's I really do think that he's the closest we've had to like a Benny Parsons kind of person in the booth with just, an unfiltered excitement and just being into it during the competition. And again, and I think he projects well too. Compared to the other commentators. So I don't know how practical that is. I know that sometimes you got to just put people someplace if you have a whole lot of talent there. And I think NBC is grappling with that because I do think they've been overstaffed for these last few years. And maybe that somebody up there is finally starting to realize it. And they're kind of experimenting with having Dale Jr. do the play-by-play or with having somebody different on pit road or somebody different in there. I mean, they've had Marty Snyder doing some of the reporting there too, which is interesting because of course it feels like that's rubbed off on him where Snyder is reporting from pit road. And it seems like even from there, he's trying to do the play-by-play. So now at the same time, I don't think the best race is where everybody is doing the play-by-play because that just gets to be too much. But again, something I think they're at least willing to experiment, which is something that Fox has had varying degrees of success with on their side. I think they're still very unfinished. They have had many more issues on the direction side. But here on NBC, I think they're getting a bit closer to it. I think it's more seismic when they're actually trying something because they're really close to kind of being there. But again, sometimes things just kind of are not quite where they need to be. So hopefully we're going to get things figured out there at the same time. But that'll be another thing to kind of look at too. So let's see here. I guess, we got... let me take this out here. Let's see. So we'll talk about the Xfinity Series race and the Truck Series race here as well. I also have something very much for our show and tell segment tonight. Also, of course, I'd be remiss without going too much further in the show to not mention, again, condolences to the families of both Buddy Arrington, who passed away earlier this past week, and to Neil Soapy Castles there this past week. It's been kind of a rough week in terms of longtime owner drivers in the sport. As I did indicate earlier today, I am currently working on a video on Buddy Arrington's career that will be part of the the driver profile series, much in the same form as the Mike Potter and J.R. Charbonneau, like kind of a video in that structure. I was actually kind of working on a bit of that script a little bit during the rain delay that we had this morning here. So I actually kind of worked on a good portion of that. I'm hopeful to have the script on that finished this week and start recording that. I know I feel like I've been saying that from one project to the next, but that's definitely something that I'm working on. I am also looking on doing something on Neil Castles as well. I actually started doing some research on that yesterday, and that may be coming up here in the near future. Also, this actually happened at the same time that I had actually sent out a draft of the really what I thought was really the final draft of the script for Stanton Barrett's video in Rise of the Field Fillers. I just sent that to him this past week, and hopefully hear back from him. I kind of gave him to the end of the month there just to kind of keep a wide window on that. I didn't want him to kind of rush through that. But we're very close to getting that one recorded too. So really the rest of this month is going to be pretty busy with recording these videos and hopefully getting those up here. But the Buddy Arrington one is still definitely the higher priority right now at this point. And definitely that's why I want to definitely give a shout out to the Throwback brand as well with this Arrington ad here. I had this saved on the side. I did attempt to reach out to Arrington's family last year. I spoke with Joey Arrington briefly and looked to speak with his father about doing a project on that because I really enjoyed all those old Chryslers and Dodges that he ran back then, and just kind of that very much that lone wolf spirit of the owner drivers that I do typically talk about on this channel here as well. But unfortunately, things didn't work out that way there. And then, of course, the news this past week. So once that news broke, I already had a lot of the material together, and I'm just going to put that out there and certainly make that out there. In a perfect world, I would have had the video out there beforehand, but I'm certainly happy to definitely bring up Buddy there in that project. And I was very touched by a lot of the response that people had about Buddy this week. I think there was a lot of great posts that people were making on social media. A lot of people that, were very much involved, including there was one person that posted on there that actually operated his fan club that provided some great pictures there along the way. I've spoken with Brian Hallman about some pictures he'd like to contribute to the video there as well. And he's working on that as well. He was talking to me about that. So many people had so much respect for Buddy, and from a lot of the research that I've looked at so far, it seemed like he just had this wonderful, happy personality that really attracted a lot of people to be fans of him or help out his team. Again, a lot of similarities to JD McDuffie and other owner drivers of that time period. I believe it was Jimmy Means who said that Buddy was like the hardest owner driver that he had to race because he had that close friendship with the Petties and the running a lot of the old Petty equipment there. And even though it was secondhand from what was the top team of the time period. And it was still a time where Buddy could be really competitive out there. So this is definitely another project that I'm very excited to put together here. It was something I was going to have further down the line here. But definitely, I certainly hope that this will, if people weren't already fans of Buddy Arrington or didn't know who he was, I certainly hope this will be something that could be, in some small way, be some contribution to that as well. I was very surprised, especially as well, when Dale Jr. responded to the tweet there earlier this week and talking about, how much he respected him as well. I know Jr., of course, is through Jimmy Means and other owner drivers, of course, has always had kind of his ear to the ground with that as well. But I did hear what happened was I heard from Gabe Wood over at JD Motorsports, and he was told that Johnny Davis informed them about what would happen with Buddy there at that point, and definitely wanted to kind of spread the word at that point. But definitely a lot of mention of him this week. And hopefully, again, I am looking to do something on Neil Castles as well, because I feel like there's a lot of similarities there too, certainly from another owner driver in his career, and a lot of similarities even with Stanton Barrett, and the fact that Neil Castles was a stuntman as well in a lot of his racing work as well. So I'm looking to work on something along that lines. So, we're kind of working on that. Don't have a deadline or anything set with those projects working on, but they're definitely still in the works here at this point. But definitely wanted to make sure I address that. At the same point, we got plenty more content here coming up on the channel, and talking very much about the sports past as well as the present, as we are here on the show tonight. So we'll talk about the Xfinity Series race and the Truck Series race here at the same time. I want to kind of get into, we didn't have the Truck Series. I'm sorry. We didn't have that this week. So used to the triple headers these weeks here, but of course, things are going to be different with just these next couple of weeks with just 2 races here. On the Xfinity Series side, again, a much different race than what we saw today. Certainly more of a clean green affair with the field very much strung out. Ty Gibbs pulling off the victory in that one. And this particular race had a lot of great storylines in qualifying. It was good to see Kyle Weatherman get a top 10 start with the Jesse Iwuji Motorsports team. I know we've talked about him a lot on the show here. Jesse was out for exercises with the, I believe it was with the Navy Reserve, and wasn't able to compete this weekend. Weatherman got in the car, qualified in the 8th position and finished 16th, a fantastic run for the number 34 entry this week. That was certainly good to see. The other team that was really talked about too was the Bassett brothers. Dylan Bassett getting the number 77 car. I wasn't expecting these guys to come back out here for the Xfinity Series after the wreck that they had at Pocono. I figured, I don't know if that was the only car they had or one of maybe only a couple cars they had, but clearly they had another. Either they pieced this one back together from Pocono, or they had another one in reserve to get back out here. They bring this car to the track, and not only do they qualify for the race, which has already been a big struggle for them, but they qualify 14th. I thought that was a fantastic story and very well deserved for him. Unfortunately, Dylan had to drop to the tail end of the field before the start. It didn't seem like it was from any penalty or anything. From what it seemed to me is like very similar to what we see from the BJ McLeod team, for example, just voluntarily dropping to the back, making sure he's not involved in an incident. Perhaps anticipating something that, like we saw today, that happened with JJ Yaley in the Cup Series race, not wanting to be in a situation where things get crazy and you have you run the risk of course, getting in a big wreck. Weatherman himself, who did stay in the top 10, was very close to a couple incidents in the very early laps there. Him racing Josh Berry and the other JR Motorsports entries that were towards the front of the field. It was good to see him at least keep that car clean. But unfortunately, the situation for Bassett ended up losing a lap in the early stages, finished last car under power in the 34th position at the finish of the race there. But your last place finisher, Matt Mills, ended up spinning out in a chain reaction after CJ McLaughlin wrecked off of turn 2. Again, fairly open shut last place battle. Not a lot of mechanical issues there that settled this one. Had a lot of drivers that were just kind of running tail end of the field there. Mills coming back from an engine failure in practice, or I believe qualifying. Actually, I guess it was practice that kept him out of qualifying. 78 car for him after swapping rides with his teammates. Ends up at the back of the field there. Unfortunately, spins out in the chain reaction there. Didn't seem like he had too much damage, but unfortunately, once he backed off the outside wall, had to kind of pull into the garage area at that point. And his day was done. McLaughlin had a massive hit into turn 2 before that situation there. Good to see him get out of the car there at that point, but a very hard hit for the number 38 car, finishing next to last. Josh Williams, who swapped into the number 5 that Matt Mills usually runs, finished in the 36th position, had an electrical issue, spent a couple unexpected trips to pit road, and ended up well back in the order there. David Starr had fire behind the right front wheel, almost similar to what we saw with Cole Custer today, but luckily not nearly as severe. Regardless, it was a hub failure that ended up taking Starr out of the race, and rounding out the bottom 5 was the aforementioned Dylan Bassett in that situation. So again, a bit of controversy in this race as well, certainly with AJ Allmendinger and the cool suit that has continued to fail on him. 2 consecutive weeks where, the same driver has to deal with heat exhaustion. Luckily in this one, a much shorter race. And once again, Allmendinger digging deep and getting a top 10 out of it, finishing in the 7th position there ahead of his teammate, Daniel Hemrick, and 2 spots ahead of his other teammate, Landon Castle, taking the 10th spot there. Again, this is something that the Colleague team, I'm sure they're going to be on top of. It seems like this is a pretty strict organization. As friendly and as excited as Chris Rice and the folks there are, I'm sure they're really going to be keeping things very, keeping people responsible for whatever is going on there with that, because the heat is definitely something you can't play around with. And we've seen the harsh realities of that is through Allmendinger these couple weeks. And we're coming up on some very physical races for them. I mean, they got Watkins Glen coming up in a couple weeks, and then we got Daytona. There's going to be Bristol, not too much further down the line, all during the heat of the summer and early fall. So hopefully that's something that they could figure out there at the same time. Very disappointing that they had to deal with that at the same time there. But again, I think a solid race there. I mean, Ty Gibbs definitely had the best car at the end of it. Was kind of on cruise control there. Towards the end, a little bit of debris on the grill, but that got cleared up along the way. But a lot of other teams, not too many other teams outperforming their runs, although it was good to see JJ Yeley get a top 20 in that, especially with the frustrations that I'm sure he dealt with today in the Cup Series race there. 20th place run for Yeley in the Saturday race, ahead of such teams as Jeb Burton for Our Motorsports, and a lot of the Mario Gosselin efforts there with Alex LeBay in 26th. And a few other drivers back there. Brandon Brown, good to see him back in the 68 car. I know he's been in the news a bit lately, and unfortunately, the news has usually been bad with the situation with the sponsorship for the number 68 car. Good to see him get back in there and not a Cup Series regular and finishing in the 13th spot. I'm sure they were hoping to get a top 10 to kind of bounce back and get the best run they can, but certainly an improvement from the last place run he had in this race last year. We'll see what comes up there I guess in a couple weeks there for the Xfinity series of Watkins Glen as to who's going to be in which car. That's going to be a big story in the entry list storylines in a couple weeks. But of course, this weekend just going to be the Truck Series and the Cup Series in Richmond. And that will be the other story that we'll certainly be talking about there at the same time. But again, congratulations to Ty Gibbs on the win and Matt Mills in last place. So again, kind of in terms of the stuff we usually cover in this case here with the back markers, fairly open and shut in terms of, again, which drivers were back in the lineup. But those are definitely other ones that you can certainly talk about here at the same time. I saw a couple of super chats here. Thank you so much for these here as well. Let me make sure I jump into these here too for this. First of all, thank you, Beast of Metal. I saw yours pop up at the start here. I did miss this, but I'll mention it here on the show here. For those who are still watching the post-race, am I the only one who feels like Marty Snyder just threw a bucket full of MJ-flavored shade in Brad Daugherty's face regarding the 80s and 90s Cavs-Bulls rivalry? Now, I will admit, I'm not the most knowledgeable in basketball history. I've been meaning to watch The Last Dance, but it's just I just haven't got around to it yet. But it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I guess like NBC has had like a history. I know I'm kind of thinking of like the times where Alan Bestwick, I guess, isn't Bestwick like a hardcore Boston Red Sox fans in baseball? Like, I mean, they would always kind of needle at each other about that, or, you know, different broadcasters supporting different teams. It wouldn't surprise me. I'm sure good-natured in the case of Marty Snyder there too. But I'll be interested if there's anything more on social media about that. But no, I did not notice that offhand there, but that would certainly be interesting to see it there at the same time. Michael Jensen, thank you for your super chat as well. Great run by Austin Hill in his debut, top 20 most of the day. You go over the bottom half of playoff points, and who would be out if there are more than 16 winners? That's a good suggestion, Michael. Yeah, let's jump into that. So yeah, if we have more than 16 winners, where are we with that? Let me see if we can get the live lineup here. Actually, I could check Pocris's page. Usually post points pretty quickly, although I'm not sure if they're available quite this early, but I do like the idea. Let's see what we get here. We got the race results so far. I don't see that, but I guess we got, let's just go ahead and take it from last week's points here, and we can figure it out from there, although it's certainly taken a bit of a shuffle here today. We got standings. Here we go. So, okay, we got other race winners. Yeah, that's kind of the amazing thing. Ryan Blaney, second overall in the point standings with no wins this year. If you just had the combined points, he'd be only 125 points behind Chase Elliott for the overall point lead. Of course, all this is moot because the points are going to reshuffle based on wins and so forth and different seedings. Although Chase with the 4 wins is still going to be pretty much leading that one. But Ryan Blaney, second overall in the points. Martin Truex Jr. now bumped out of the top 16, despite being 4th overall in points, at least coming into this race, with 3 top 5s and 9 top 10s. Would ordinarily be 150 points out of the overall lead, or 25 points behind Ryan Blaney. That has now changed quite a bit, with now Harvick winning and Blaney occupying the only remaining spot in this lineup. Looking back at other drivers that don't have wins, Harvick makes the leap from 10th overall in the points to make it up there. But then you look at Eric Almirola, you know, the last place finish that he had at Indy, had this big wreck again today in Michigan. That's a driver that I think is one certainly to watch here these next couple of weeks. Is a past winner of the July race at Daytona. Yes, it was rain shortened, and yes, it was with the Petties instead of Stewart Haas. But this is a driver that's really just had a lot of bad luck these couple of weeks, which is unfortunate because he was so strong at the start of the year. I think he was really hoping on having a good run in this race after he was pretty solid at Fontana back in the spring. But regardless, going to be well back in the lineup there. Still showing him just ahead of Eric Jones. Jones, I think, leapfrogged Almirola with his top 5 that he had today. Looked like he had a fine run out there. One of the best runs he had overall since the race at Fontana. Actually, excuse me, running in the 8th position. Was top 5 at one point, but finished 8th in the results here. But regardless, another driver that you really have to watch at Daytona. Again, I don't want to say too much about drivers having to count on this one, but I don't really typically think of Jones being great at Richmond or being really that exceptional at road racing with Watkins Glen. Certainly Daytona with the past winner, driving for the number 20 team, Joe Gibbs Racing, going to be further back in that lineup. You know, yeah, then you have that particular situation. Of course, Bubba Wallace still being included in that conversation, having his momentum that he's had these last few weeks. Is that going to keep going at Richmond or Watkins Glen? Or is it going to be a situation where he's going to count on winning Daytona? But we've seen this so many times with like people like Dale Jr. or Jimmy Johnson in his swan song season, just not being able to count on getting that win. I know the Daytona being the cutoff is still a relatively recent phenomenon, but even before that, it was still kind of one of those X Factor races when it was in July. that you would have an unexpected winner that would be able to position themselves in the playoffs. Yes, not in a season nearly as competitive as what we have now, but that could definitely be one to look at too. Further back in terms of winless drivers, Austin Dillon. I expected Dillon to be more of a factor in the race today, especially given the fact that he almost won this race last year before he had the tangle with Brad Keselowski. Unfortunately, ended up involved in that incident. Missed out on a real good shot at getting in the playoffs that way, but ended up back in the lineup. Again, another driver I'm not sure about Richmond or Watkins Glen being a big factor for him, but that's another one to kind of look at too. Justin Haley being a past Daytona winner, yes, with the lightning hold, seems like there's a lot of conditions between a lot of these drivers in terms of their Daytona wins. But that would be another one to look at. Chris Buescher has just been really picking up the pace lately. Again, mentioned the Indianapolis run. Could he do something at the road course? Again, I'm not sure on that one. Ricky Stenhouse, Cole Custer, and pretty much when you get to that point there, I mean, you really have drivers that are just absolutely on the outside trying to look in. Brad Keselowski back in the 29th position in points. I'm sure he's looking forward to Daytona. That's probably one of the few races he's had this year where he's been a real factor in the outcome. Although it seemed like he was flirting with something today and finishing in the 15th position, but that would be one to look at. In terms of other drivers that are going to be shuffled out that are already locked into points, if you're thinking about that, Michael, again, I guess Kurt Busch is one you really have to look at. I'm sure he's going to get a medical waiver if he can stay in the points, but I'm not sure mathematically where that is working out, because now that he's missed 3 races, we're in a situation that you really have to kind of figure out, okay, are there enough points on the table that he can stay in the top 16 in points? I guess there still is, because it seems like most of the time when they show the actual points rankings and how many playoff points these drivers have and where they're going to be ranked in the seedings, I haven't really seen the 45 be at the absolute tail end of that group. So I'm not exactly sure how that's going to shake out. I had really thought that Austin Cindric was going to be in a situation where he was going to get bumped out of the top 16. When I was starting to put together the article today on his last place run, really since he led those laps at Gateway, Cindric has really racked off some fantastic runs. Yes, that was helped a bit because there were a lot of road courses over the summer, but that wasn't necessarily a given. Even when there was Sears Point and Road America, and then most recently his runner-up finish, Tyler Reddick, at the Indianapolis Infield Road Course, he had some other good runs on the ovals as well. And this is, in this race here, I think was a bit more of an uphill climb for him, where he had a top 5 in the Truck Series, but never even finished in the top 10 in the Xfinity Series. Very surprising, given, of course, his background, driving for Penske, of course, Ford being very good at this track, but still just kind of struggling at this track through that whole time. But then he qualified 5th in the race today. I'm sure if that wreck didn't happen, he probably would have had a good shot at least the top 10. But unfortunately, things didn't shake out for him. Certainly his teammates, Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano, got to be a factor at least late in the race here. But that would be another one to look at. Chase Briscoe is still the question. It seemed like with Briscoe getting at least one stage point in one of those stages today was some positive momentum, but the run falling further back, 20th place, just ahead of Josh Bilicki and Cody Ware to be the last cars on the lead lap. You can't have runs like that and stay up there. I think Briscoe, and if it's not Kurt Busch, and I don't know again what the point situation is or what mark he needs to beat, if it's still the same top 35 thing from what Kyle Busch had in 2015, or again, if there's enough points on the table for Kurt to keep up there between Richmond, Watkins Glen, and Daytona, if he is in fact coming back at Richmond, which we still don't know yet. I think Briscoe is definitely one of the ones you really got to worry about if we get more than 16 winners, because for whatever reason, and I don't know why, he's really been all over the place. And it's surprising because, at times when he can go for the lead, we saw this at the 600, we saw this at the Bristol Dirt Race, and we saw this, of course, when he won his race at Phoenix. He can go for it, but then sometimes he just taps over that line a little too much. And then ultimately the race at Bristol and the race at the 600 weren't the great finishes that Phoenix turned out to be. And then in other races like we have today, he's not really even much of a factor really most of the day. I think if it came down between Cindric and Briscoe, I would go with Cindric. I think not just the experience of Penske racing, even though you got 2 different Ford teams and maybe they're more or less equal aerodynamically with the next gen car, Penske seems to really have their stuff together here at this point. And again, I think it was overlooked coming into this race, certainly by the broadcast group and really by both Lasbro and myself. We didn't pick Ford drivers to win this race either. This is, again, traditionally a Ford track. Next week at Richmond, certainly more a Toyota track in recent memory. And again, I do think Truex is going to probably be pretty tough in that one. But we've seen Truex give races away for 99 cents before, and that could happen as well. That could happen just as easily. So I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen when all that plays out too. But looking further back, I mean, I'm just kind of looking at my diecast lineup here in the meantime. Alex Bowman, I mean, the qualifying runs, I mean, these last couple, especially today here, really got to make sure to get the most out of those, make sure to get those stage points he needs. A good finish today. Glad that he had that. That's really going to help him. But again, I think that if you're really looking at drivers that are going to be bumped out, I think you're kind of in that group. And again, that's assuming we get more than 16 winners, which is certainly now a possibility. Now we got 15. Yeah, I mean, are you going to get somebody unusual that's going to win Watkins Glen? That's certainly possible. But it can't be somebody like AJ Allmendinger. It's going to have to be somebody that's eligible for full season points. Is it going to be a guy like, I mean, is it going to be Truex? Is it going to be Blaney? Is it going to be, one of those guys? I'm not sure. But I think that's what makes it exciting. And again, as much as I'm not a big playoff fan, and that I still do think that a full season championship would make these individual races more meaningful and the competition more compelling. We're working with this system now. I think that that does at least raise some questions. The big issue, I think, between certainly Richmond and Watkins Glen that can't be overlooked is it's very possible those races are going to have very, very low attrition. Certainly Richmond has had a lot of races where maybe one or two cars have fallen out of the race. So if you're counting on a driver actually straight up just having an engine failure or getting in a wreck, going to be a little bit less likely. Very rare that you have a multi-car pileup like you had in Michigan. In Michigan itself, very rare that it has multi-car pileups. Kind of reminds me of New Hampshire a couple weeks ago, where we did end up seeing that in both the Xfinity and the Cup Series races there. I think in the case of Richmond, it's going to be a lot like today in terms of pit strategy and just having the right strategy. Denny Hamlin coming from out of nowhere on the fresh tire strategy to kind of drive through everybody and take the lead could very easily be the same situation here. And with low, not having a lot of attrition, that means you're not going to have a lot of cautions. You have a long green flag run there. Who's going to be able to stay up there? Generally going to be the Toyota teams. Are the Fords going to be able to stay up there? That's going to be the real question. And are they going to really run interference to make sure Martin Truex makes the playoffs? Or is Truex going to have a fast enough piece that he can just kind of do it on his own? I don't know. Watkins Glen, the other situations you have with that is, of course, like any other road course. You have the possibility of being in a perfect position with perfect pit strategy. You just pit with everybody else. Of course, the cautions have screwed up being able to run these races backwards and come up with really creative pit strategies. You could be there on the last lap, be leading, be in the right position, just put one wheel off and then end up spinning off the course and then just not being a factor there. That's going to be the real issue at that point. And Watkins Glen is a track that's unforgiving in very different ways. I know that a lot of the runoffs are paved, and that's made some very clean races these last couple of years. But I think we're going to see a very physical race at Watkins Glen this year because we don't have that situation with the arrow push where cars can't get very close to each other and people are trying to get around somebody that just can't, and they're following each other for 40 laps. I don't think we're going to see that. I don't want to hype this too much because Watkins Glen has always been kind of a very daredevil kind of road course with those long straightaways and those hard 90-degree turns. But I think we're going to see a very physical race out of the Cup Series guys this year and really trying to work their way up there. I don't think it's going to be as much of a strategy race. I think it's going to be just a bit of a barroom brawl, especially heading into Daytona. And then Daytona, I'd like to believe that we're going to have some pretty clean racing as we saw at parts of the Daytona 500 this year. Yes, we had some pretty big wrecks there at the same time. And also the very possibility that we're going to have more teams actually entered in that because it's been so long since we've had 40 car fields since Daytona. I mean, really since the 500 this year. So that's kind of been an issue on that side. That'll be kind of the interesting one. And of course, that's a complete crapshoot. I guess not as much as Talladega, because again, handling is much more of a factor at Daytona. I would expect again, Bubba Wallace is going to be very strong in that one. I think you gotta watch those Penske guys because they're always sneaky. Ryan Blaney seems like he always finds a way to get in there, and of course, Cindric winning the 500, Joey Logano being a past 500 winner. Are we going to see a return to form for the Keselowski team? I mean, is Brad Keselowski going to suddenly figure things out and punch his ticket the last second after being well back in the points this year? Is Chris Buescher going to be able to do one position better than the runner-up finish he almost had before he got disqualified? I believe it was last year. Again, that's going to be up in the air. So, again, long answer to your question, Michael, but I think that whether you're looking at drivers within the top 16 or just outside of it, I think we got something, very competitive coming up here these next couple races. I do think Richmond's going to be clean. So I think Richmond's going to be clean and green. I think with very low attrition. I think Watkins Glen is going to be very physical. Still, I'm not sure with high attrition or not. I mean, unless you get like a really, it creates a situation where you have like a multi-car situation. But, luckily with them paving over the track, I think that's probably going to be less likely this year. And then Daytona, who knows? You could get either something very clean or something that's just going to be wreck. And then, somebody just ends up with the win. But again, I think between the ones at the back of the pack, you got to look at Cindric Briscoe and Kurt Busch, and if they're going to be, the potential of being bumped out of this lineup. But that picture is going to get a lot clearer here in these next couple of days. That's certainly for sure. Let me get this here at the same time. Beast Metal, thank you so much for your super chat here as well. Also regarding the broadcast, if NBC could stop chattering like a pack of lemmings about the possibility of a caution instead of appreciating the race, that would be really great. Absolutely. And this is not just an NBC issue. Fox is equally guilty of this. And I probably should have hammered this more in my broadcast issue, but that it was getting way out of control. I mean, I know that Bubba Wallace is a very popular driver. I know, and you could hear the crowd cheering in the background when he was interviewed. That's fantastic. And again, everybody's got their favorites. I know nobody's perfectly, not biased or anything like that. I get we all have our preferences. There's drivers I like that I'd like to see up there. I mean, heck, if Josh Bilicki or somebody like that was in position to just completely shake things up and pull off a win, well, yeah, you bet I'm going to be excited about it. Because I know it's going to be a great story to write about, but I got to be in some kind of a situation here where I have to, you got to have some distance, especially if you're going to be a broadcaster. I think the standard is so much higher when you're on TV or radio because it just sounds bad. It doesn't make for good play-by-play because you're not describing what is happening. You're describing what you're hoping is going to happen. You can't have that situation. So, and again, I do think it's unprofessional. I think it is. I think it was ridiculous. And I felt like they were kind of scrambling to kind of come up with terms to describe Kevin Harvick's win at the end of this because they knew it too. They knew it was getting too far. Would it be great to have Bubba Wallace in the playoffs? Of course. But again, it's either going to happen or it's not. And again, I appreciate NASCAR being a bit more neutral and throwing the caution and Suarez pulling off the track with the flat tire. It wasn't a situation like Custer with the fire or anything. It wasn't a situation that needed to have a caution out there. So I'm glad they're showing a bit more restraint in there and not just setting up a situation where they just want to have, a perfect storyline and so forth there, or at least perfect, I guess, in their eyes for whatever reason, one reason or another. I know there's a lot of very charged opinions on one side or the other with Bubba Wallace. I'm not really talking about that, but certainly, again, I think even Bubba Wallace himself would be very happy knowing that, he pulls off a victory and, he went out there and earned it, and again, much like he did at Talladega. I know there was a lot of criticism about that, but he got back out there and, he raced under the same restrictions that everybody else had, that there was rain coming and they all knew it was coming soon and they had to get up there. Wanting to get up there and actually making the moves to get up there are very different situations. The fact that he was capable of doing that, yeah, he's the winner. Celebrate it just like anything else. So, and again, it would have been the same thing today. So I think that's the very same situation from this race today. And hopefully, again, if it works out, great. If it doesn't, and he's trying to pick up just wins at the end of the season and then just hit the reset button next year, that may just be the situation, but that's part of it. And again, if you don't want to be in that situation where you've got to win these last 3 races, then you got to win earlier. And again, and I know second's a hard pill to swallow, but there are worse things. There are much, much worse things out there, especially as professional athlete. So another thing to kind of look at there at the same time, but I'm with you on that at the same time. So I do appreciate the message there on that too. So let me get on to here. So we are going to, hang on. Oh, okay. No, hang on. I was just checking this comment here too. So yeah. So we're going to go ahead and get into our trivia segment and show and tell here in a little bit. If you guys have any other questions about the action here, you can go ahead and mention that in the chat here. I'm going to kind of browse a little bit here at the same time. Jolly Jake Lavelle, thank you so much for your support there. I hope you're not too far off of NASCAR, because I think we're getting a really entertaining season with these different winners. There's still some good storylines out there, but I do appreciate your support here for sure. So I'm glad you're enjoying the show here tonight. Thank you. Oh, hello, Alex. Thank you for our Brazilian viewer here today is in the chat. Thank you for tuning in. And we'll jump into that too. Let's see here. Yes, Ty Gibbs was very good today. Again, congratulations to him on that. I think there were some really good runs for these drivers. I'm looking forward to the moment again that Noah Gragson and Ty Gibbs are racing each other. Like I think both of them, I was so impressed with Ty Gibbs' debut and how he handled himself in that Pocono race. That's such a difficult track. I mean, you mentioned Bubba Wallace. I mean, that's where he made his debut in the Cup Series. And, he did even better than that. Yes, with a very different team, with more resources than Petty's did when Bubba was driving for him. But again, I was gobsmacked with how well he did. I know he's fantastic in the Xfinity Series. I know there's that bit of nepotism, of course, that's always going to come up in these discussions with him, in the family team and so forth. But he's impressive, and I think Ty Gibbs is the real deal, and I think he's one to certainly watch. Noah Gragson too. I think he's entertaining. I think that unfortunately sometimes he goes a bit too far. There's a little bit of Ernie Irvin in him there. When the wreck at Road America with Sage Karam, I think was too much. But again, I think that these two kids, if they get up there, I was always waiting to see like what was going to be the next Tim Richmond and Dale Earnhardt battle, or Petty and Pearson. I don't know if we're seeing it now with Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain, or if it's something of a different caliber there. Again, I'm always anxious to see that rivalry, that one that's really easily identifiable in that sense, and one that really transcends from one season to the next. NASCAR's been without that for a little bit. I mean, at least a little bit. It seems like you have a driver that wants to kind of unseat somebody, but maybe they're so far ahead that they can't really do it. I think of all the times, again, Jimmy Johnson's dominance for one thing, or anything between Carl Edwards and Brad Keselowski. It's been rivalries of, in a different sense of two drivers that are just really, really dominant at the same time, and they're just jockeying for these positions one week to the next. Hamlin and Chastain are probably the closest we've seen to that, even though it's also been situations where they've been back in the field, like the Gateway situation. I think that's very exciting. Let's see. Yeah, Jordan Anderson and the DNQ, Andrew. Yeah, I'm seeing a comment on that. That was a bummer. I think it would be really good to see, to have the number 32 and the 31 there at Xfinity. I don't know what the future plans are with the Anderson team, if they're going to run 2 cars in more races. Because Anderson's had some good runs. He's only done a few Xfinity races. He started doing some starting parks for RSS racing. Now, of course, he's got his own organization, focusing more on the Xfinity one than his kind of part-time effort in the truck series here. But hopefully they can run some more races there coming up here too. I think that'll be another one to certainly look at. Yeah, there was no truck race. So yeah, exactly. I'm so used to having there being all 3 series, but I have to keep reminding myself. It's like, who finished last of the trucks? It's like, wait, there wasn't one this week. So trucks would certainly put a good show on at Michigan, but I think that'd be another one to talk about. Jolly Jake, yeah, seeing you mentioned Brad Keselowski being good in the booth. Absolutely, him too. Certainly a lot to say about that at the same time there. So let's see here. But yeah, it's definitely another one to kind of look there too. So we'll get into our trivia section here for tonight. And again, yeah, like I said, if you have any questions or things to kind of go over from this weekend here, we'll certainly talk about that on the show here. In the meantime, we'll bring out our late 90s NASCAR Trivial Pursuit thing, and we'll do some questions here to wrap up this segment. And I got a little something for our show and tell segment as you guys pick your categories. So again, the next categories are, for those of you new in here, NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. These are, again, your categories: NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are your categories. So feel free to go ahead and mention in the comments which category you'd like me to do here. See your question here, Andrew Bremner asking about Michigan having 1 races or 2. I think still they need to have, every track should just have 1 date. I'm still very firmly in that camp. I think having a situation where you can have the, every track be allowed to be unique, every track be allowed to have the same hype that Formula One does. I think it's one, as much as I don't like Formula One that much, I'm not a huge fan of it. I think that the way that they could go to each track once and have each track allowed to be special and feature discussions of what's in the area, I think that's the way that NASCAR needs to go. As much as I like having the Daytona cutoff race, again, change that up. Have Atlanta have their 1 date. We have 3 super speedways. Have Atlanta be the cutoff race. I mean, just do that. I mean, you can still have a super speedway do it. Which ones would you keep? I think that's always going to be the question. If it's going to be Daytona, it's got to be the 500. If it's the 600, if it's Charlotte, it's got to be the 600. Sorry, the Roval is expendable to me. And I think it is. I think if people are being really honest, it's expendable to them too. The 600 is the 600 for Pete's sake. We have plenty enough road courses we can go to. Again, if it's Martinsville, keep the fall race. Don't have the spring race where nothing happened. Have the fall race where it's actually cut off to the playoffs. If you have to have playoffs still, which I don't think you do, have Martinsville still be the penultimate race. I think, if it's Phoenix, okay, have it be the spring race, part of the West Coast swing. Have Homestead be back to the championship round. See how you have every single track be unique this way? You could split it in half so easily. And it's already happening with a lot of tracks. Just today, having Michigan just have 1 date, have Pocono just have 1 date, have Dover and New Hampshire just have 1 date. It's working out fine for them. As far as you can see, Michigan sold out its infield for the first time in a decade with 1 date. Had a great crowd out there today too. A crowd that stayed through an absolute monsoon that washed through. I think there's a lot of positives you can glean from that. Vegas should have 1 date. Kansas should have 1 date. Same one down the line. Let's just kind of figure it out that way. I think that would be the best way to set that up. I think that would be good. Bristol, the night race or the dirt race. Well, you keep the night race, of course. The dirt race is a gimmick. Knock that one out. It's ridiculous. And it's unfortunate because I used to like the spring race at Bristol. But again, I think in sake of consistency, I don't believe in creating, one exception to it, because remember, folks, this is why these races start so late in the day. You can thank the folks at the Texas Motor Speedway for that, because everybody wanted to have these races start early in the morning. And then Texas is like, no, we want to have our races start later in the day. And then what happened? All the other tracks came in. Then they wanted their dates later. They wanted their times to start later. And then pretty soon we had all the races in the late afternoon again. So you have to be firm about this. This is why I always say you got to have like an actual, Bill France, Big Bill France or Bill France Jr. kind of figure to kind of lead that, or, have that attitude. You got to be firm about these things, because then it makes it better. I mean, it was, NASCAR always dealt with like a meat cleaver, when it came to, cutting, certain things down. When they wanted to get rid of dirt tracks and any races that were under 250 miles, they did that. They just said, okay, boom, that's not it. And then suddenly their schedule went from 48 races to 31. That's as simple as you can do it. So again, and this is coming from somebody that grew up just getting our 1 date a year at Sears Point. We had to make do with it. I don't think it's fair for these other tracks to have it. And I think really, as much as I haven't really, and it'd be interesting to kind of understand the history of this a bit better, but it really seems like a lot of these tracks had 2 dates just because they were filling in the schedule from cutting down the schedule. That you had 2 dates at Pocono, you had 2 dates in Michigan. You had only so many tracks that you were actually going to run these races on. But that's not the time that we're in now. You can run these things in the LA Coliseum. And once you can do that, you can really run these cars just about everywhere. We'll see if the Chicago Street Course thing happens, but that's a whole other mess that I don't even know what's going to happen there. So that's kind of what we're looking at here too. So yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm looking at that point here too. So I'm not sure where we have, let's see, where are we with the categories here? Alrighty. Yeah, if we have any other, let's see, which I see a lot for tracks. We might end up doing tracks for the category. Is that with the leader here? Let's see here. Beast of Metal. I'm not sure which category. If you have lights, yeah, if you have lights, have two. See, again, if you create exceptions, you're going to end up with exactly what we have now. And again, if you're happy with what you have now, maybe that's cool. But I think, again, having standalone races, each one, just stick with each one and make the most of it. And I think that would also help from a broadcasting standpoint, because they would have to make the most of it. Like if you want to see the sites around the area, well, there's that one date that you have. And then the alternative is, okay, have more series. Maybe NASCAR is considering that, because I haven't heard anything new about this electric car thing they were talking about for the Clash. But if that's the case, then okay, you're going to have multiple events at that venue. And maybe those dates are at different dates. They're not all in the same weekend. They can explore that option. So, who knows? Who knows? That would be another one to kind of look at. But that's another one to kind of look at. Yeah, Beast of Metal, thank you for handling that one there earlier too. Where are, let's see, which one is, okay. Let's see, where are we on this? I'll let you go ahead and I'll go ahead and let you count it up here, Beast of Metal. You don't have to, I don't mean to put you on the spot there, but as you're totaling it up here, we'll do our show and tell segment here for this. So again, wearing the, flying the colors for Buddy Arrington this weekend. Michigan track, as I mentioned on Twitter, was actually the last track that he had a top 10 finish on. His 103rd and last of his Cup Series career. Never won a Cup Series race. Neil Castles as well drove, for I believe about 400 starts in his career. Never won a Cup Series race. And Castles' last place finish actually occurred at the Michigan track, I believe, in 1972. A little bit, kind of overlapping time periods there. Pretty much the end of Castles' career was around the very early years of Arrington's career. But between the two of them covered multiple decades of NASCAR history as owner-drivers. And eventually had other upstart drivers run for them towards the end of their career. Buddy Arrington had drivers like Dale Jarrett and Ken Schrader run his car. Schrader had to buy his ride out of the last Richmond Fairgrounds race in 1988. So you'd have a different situation like that. Neil Castles, I believe, if memory serves, I think Dale Earnhardt drove for him in the 06 car at one point in his career. And had other competitors run for him there too. So different drivers that were not just famous for being drivers, but also famous for being team owners as well. Unfortunately, both teams didn't, last into, very far into the modern era. Arrington's did for a time, almost got into the 1990s actually, which will be discussed a bit more in the video. But with Neil Castle's effort, things were a bit different in that sense too. So what I have here for this, and I actually found this last year, and I picked this up here in anticipation of doing the Arrington video. I found this old picture here of Buddy Arrington and his number 67, his Reed's Trailers car. There we go. Hopefully it doesn't have too much glare on it there. I thought this was really cool, especially that old, I think this is the Dodge Magnum here, the Samdell Dodge car. We always had the sponsors back then with whatever dealership was nearest to the track. So this must be an Atlanta picture here. With it being an Atlanta, Georgia Dodge dealer here, Samdell Dodge. Reed's Trailers, one of his many sponsors, very similar to like JD McDuffie, had a lot of local sponsors that helped him out over the years. But this, of course, being an old picture of his there. It's just, again, a great picture of him there. Had the sideburns well before Paul Menard was ever even a thought in the Cup Series there. And kind of had his own unique style. That's one of the greatest things of these owner drivers. They always were such unique personalities. But again, it has, at the same time, I picked up this picture on eBay last year, and it has like a little caption typed out on the back here, and I'll read this off here. It says, with 13 races still remaining on the 1978 NASCAR Winston Cup schedule, Veteran independent Buddy Arrington is enjoying his most productive season in recent years. Arrington is currently in the top 10 of the Winston Cup drivers standings. So that being the caption going with this picture here. So definitely wanted to bring that up here on the show here too. And kind of get a little bit of a closer look at the paint scheme there as well. Red and blue. I mean, running the same vermilion and blue there of the old Petty Enterprises cars. Just didn't repaint them. Like basically got the same paint scheme out there. Ran that very distinct font there, the number 67. Very reminiscent of the number 70 font there on JD's cars there, and just became identifiable with that number. He ran all but about 62 of his 560 Cup starts were run with the number 67. So he absolutely made that number his own. It was a little disappointing not to see anything I noticed at least honoring both the lives of Buddy Arrington and Neil Castles at the track this week. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if I just missed it there, but I didn't see if there were any special decals on cars or anything like that. Hopefully something comes up here in the near future. But again, for those of you tuning in a bit later here, I am working on a video on Buddy Arrington's career that I've now put in, putting a script together on that. I have done this especially since now I got the script for Stanton Barrett's episode done and submitted that to him to review. So this fits in well to kind of get that in there and make sure to get another video hopefully the near future here for you guys to check out. And I really enjoyed putting the script together. You know, unfortunately, I never got a chance to interview him. But again, a tremendous individual with some of the most awesome looking cars. The Chrysler Imperial, I've seen you mention that in here. Jolly Jake Lavelle. Yes, absolutely. The Chrysler Imperial has to be seen to be believed. Definitely Google it there if you haven't seen it already. Some of those beautiful cars that he had in that one too. So that'll be definitely interesting to see here. Too. And I do plan on doing something very similar for Neil Castles as well further down the line. I just have some research material I collected on that last night, and I want to kind of get that together too. So very excited to get this together. We're going to have some very good content coming up here. But again, condolences to the family of both Buddy Arrington and Neil Castles after the news this past week. But we'll certainly hope to, discuss these drivers more in these videos. But I think one thing that was very positive that I could see from this is in the case of both these drivers, and especially Buddy, there were so many people that wrote articles about him, so many people that talked about him and interviewed him. It's really, I think, is going to be the benefit of creating a really good description of who these drivers were and what they meant to the sport as well. So I think sometimes that was one of the big challenges in the JD McDuffie project is you really had to kind of pull things from so many different directions to try to get kind of an idea of him, because he kind of kept to himself a lot more. And of course, him running further back in the lineup. With these, it's been a little bit easier in that sense in terms of kind of getting some more of that content. So I look forward to sharing that with you guys in the near future. On the subject of JD McDuffie, there was, of course, the same week as it happened, was the estate sale over at JD McDuffie's, at Imogene McDuffie's place. Imogene passed away last year, actually during the opening laps of the Watkins Glen race, the race that her husband lost his life in 1991. Linda McDuffie did a estate sale this past week. Among the items that was sold was the actual jacket that JD wore during the Duchess Treats promotion that it was going to be sponsoring his car in 1985, along with the Restore company there. And there was a lot of interest. It was good to see so many people bidding on those auctions there. I certainly hope that's helped out the family. And it was good to see a lot of interest there. I was happy to share the link there on that. For those curious, I did bid on a couple items myself. I actually found one of the, I picked up one of the shirts that has the Winkle number 70 car on it there from 1986. I was surprised they actually made merch from that year because the Winkle sponsorship was so brief. Working with a car dealership there in 1986 for sponsoring them, but they actually did make shirts of that car with a very distinctive kind of gray and orange paint job that he ran very briefly before Steve Chrisman kind of took over the sponsorship that he had at that time period. I was also looking to kind of get some of the signed material that they had, old pit passes and stuff that JD had really saved over the years. I was amazed by what was actually shown there at the time, but it looked like there was a whole lot of interest there, and that was certainly good to see. So I'm happy to pick up a little something from that there and help the family out there at the same time. So when that comes in, we'll probably have that be a show and tell segment here on the show here at the same time. So that was definitely good to see there too. Yeah, but you got the dark blue and white McDuffie Racing. You're right on. I'm glad you picked that up. Their 611 Hornets. So good on you. I saw a lot of people. I saw Rick Houston in there. A lot of people participating in the auction. So I'm glad that word got out and people are able to participate in that there too. So very exciting there on that. So, again, the more people talk about JD, the more people remember him. Certainly this Thursday comes up on the anniversary of his accident at Watkins Glen. I don't have anything currently planned for that day. I pretty much going to be kind of focusing more on the Arrington video and getting that set up here in the meantime. But then if you are interested, and again, of course, if you haven't followed JD McDuffie's story, the second edition of my book, JD, is available on Amazon. If you just look up JD NASCAR book on Amazon, or if you check out the link on my website, lastcar.info, copies are still available. If you like your copy signed, I actually got some questions about this earlier today. If you want your copy signed, my email and my DMs are open. Just let me know. We can work something out on that and get you guys set up on that as well. So the second edition of the book is available and has that discussion there at the same time. So we'll get into that. So, yes, let's see. Where are we with the votes? Yeah, lots of voting tonight for sure. Beast of Metal. Do we have a leader on this? I think Tracks looked like it was the first one here. Let's kind of check that out. Let's see. Yeah, the Magnum. Yeah, all those great old Dodges that Arrington ran. I mean, that's something I really wanted to kind of feature in the video. I want to show as many unique pictures as possible. And luckily, again, Brian Holman is on the case. He's got some great stuff. So I'm hopeful we'll get some more information on that too. Yeah, Darlington, one date too. Yeah, Southern 500 should be the one race. I think that's fine. And Darlington's a great track, but there's a lot of great tracks out there. I mean, it definitely deserves having the one date, but I think it would be pretty fair to do that too. So yeah. Would you have each series go to different tracks? I think that's a bridge too far. You don't have to do that. That would kind of create a situation where it would be less likely to have like Cup Series and faders in the field, but maybe that would be something that would help that out too. So 13 for tracks. Wow. Beast of Metal. Thank you so much. So yeah, we'll do tracks here. We'll do a couple questions here to wrap up tonight. I know it's been a little bit of a longer show here, but we'll certainly talk about that at the same time here. So again, let's see, tracks questions. We'll jump into this. Alrighty. Let's see. Alrighty, first question here of the evening. What long-running NASCAR Winston Cup oval was Bobby Allison winless at? Question again is, what long-running NASCAR Winston Cup oval was Bobby Allison winless at? That's the first question. Sideburns are still the best. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I also actually bought some slides last year of Buddy Arrington's car. Again, I think it was the Rossi collection on eBay. They provide some great slides online there. I think their store is still open. They provide a lot of stuff from like usually the early to mid 80s, which is perfect. That's right in kind of the sweet spot of Arrington's career, and they had a few of those. So I picked those up, and so some of the pictures that are going to be in this video are going to be scanned from the original slides in there from that collection. So I think it's really going to be, visually, I'm hoping it's going to be really good, because there's not a lot of video clips of Arrington's career that are available, at least not a lot directly showing him. But I think it's going to be more of a picture-heavy video here, at least with articles and pictures and so forth. But I think that'll balance out quite well. And with Neil Castles being even a further time ago, I think that's going to be much more photographs and articles and so forth in that one, too. What long-running NASCAR Winston Cup oval was Bobby Allison winless at, is the question. We got answers: Martinsville, Bristol, Richmond, Dover, Wilkesboro, Rainbow Road, Wilkesboro. Yeah, Bobby Allison is the answer. Or Bobby Allison is the question. The answer is coming up. Which oval was he winless at? The answer is Martinsville. Martinsville. If you guys got that one. Martinsville is indeed the correct answer. Charles Peterson, you got that one right off the bat. Zachary Leffler, Alex Luft, Alexander Green, Yeah, several of you got that one. Yes, Bobby Allison is correct. Alrighty. Let's see. Here we go. Next question. Who was the first Japanese American driver invited to race at Suzuka? Think about that one. Who was the first Japanese American driver invited to race at Suzuka? Looks like we have a call and inspection. I saw the comment there. Thank you, Jason Toth. We'll pull that up here at the same time. Yes, indeed. 1 minute ago, Bob Pockers tweets, tech complete, no issues. Harvick is the winner. So again, congratulations to Kevin Harvick on pulling off the victory. And last place finisher will be Austin Cindric. Second last place finish this year. Also concluded the poll here, 117 votes in it for which driver was going to win their first cup race between Gibbs and Gragson. 77.8% came out for Ty Gibbs, the remaining 22.2% for Noah Gragson. So thumb that one in your memory there, and we'll see if that turns out to be the case sometime in the future. Let me read the question again here. Who was the first Japanese-American driver invited to race at Suzuka is our question. Hideo Fukuyama, Roger Yasukawa, Henry Cho, Kyle Larson, Chiro Suzuki. Okay, we're getting all over the place. Kazuki Nakajima, Ken Watanabe. Let's see. Who was the first Japanese-American driver invited to race at Suzuka? That would have been a fun starting grid to do back in the day. I'll tell you what. Hopefully that's something that comes back one of these days. I always figured Toyota's involvement was going to fast-track NASCAR going back there again, but it just didn't happen that way. Who was the first Japanese-American driver invited to race at Suzuka? The answer? John Kinder. John Kinder is the answer. Didn't see that one coming. I certainly didn't. John Kinder is the correct answer. Yeah, it seemed like Fukuyama would probably be the answer, but it's Japanese-American driver, so not just the native-born driver. So a lot of you guessed those, but John Kinder is the correct answer. Yeah, there's a surprising one. Yeah, Ken Squire did have trouble with that too, so there's that. Alrighty, next question here, folks. What make and model was the official pace car at the 1997 Daytona 500? What make and model was the official pace car at the 1997 Daytona 500? We're getting bots here in the chat. I guess we're doing something right if the show's getting to the point it's attracting that. But thank you for handling that, moderators, for sure. What make and model was the official pace car at the 1997 Daytona 500? I guess it's for the Pontiac Grand Prix, the Chevy Corvette, the Chevy Camaro, the Pontiac Grand Prix 1997. Alrighty. Monte Carlo Chevy Pontiac Grand Prix GTP, Pontiac Trans Am, Ford Taurus. Okay, here we go. What make and model was the official pace car at the 1997 Daytona 500? The answer is Pontiac Grand Prix. Why do you got that one? Pontiac Grand Prix. Wider is better. We got Charles Peterson Jr. I think you were the first one on that again. Stephen C. Alexander Green, Ultimate 23. Bop Sports, Kevin Love, Bean Boy 89, Alex Luft, Zachary Leffler, Matt James. There you go, several. So yeah, there you go. Pontiac Grand Prix indeed. All right, we'll just do a couple more here for this evening. All right, here we go. What dapper driver started 54 of Michigan's first 55 races, yet had no wins? Read that one again. What dapper driver started 54 of Michigan's first 55 races, yet had no wins? Just one to think about here. What dapper driver started 54 of Michigan's first 55 races, yet had no wins, is the question. Again, kudos to Harris Liu for his job on this Parker Kligerman shirt here. Good to see again that the Henderson Motorsports team got to have merch for the first time, and happy to support both the artist and the team there on that for sure. So pulling that one off here so you can see that a little bit there. Alrighty, reading the question again. What dapper driver started 54 of Michigan's first 55 races, yet had no wins, not a one? And the answer was Dave Marcus. I'm sure referencing his wingtip shoes. Dave Marcus is the correct answer. Dave Marcus. A lot of you got that one. Blake Thiemann, you got that right away. Joey Fairbanks. Yeah, Michigan question. There you go. 6'11 Hornet. Blake Thiemann, Alexander Green, Rick S., Silent Spades, Zachary Leffler. So many of these. Excellent, excellent. Alrighty. So one more for the evening here. We'll wrap this one up. Alrighty. Okay, here we go. Here's a three-parter. Three-parter here, folks. And try not to look this one up. This one's very easy to look up, but I mean, try to do it from memory. So here we go. Last question for the evening, folks. What three drivers had their pole speeds disqualified in a 1976 Daytona scandal? What three drivers had their pole speeds disqualified in a 1976 Daytona scandal? What three drivers had their pole speeds disqualified in 1976 Daytona scandal? So we're looking for three drivers' names. Harvick not among them, however. Harvick today is your winner. We did have the call about 5-10 minutes ago from Bob Pockrass. Oh yeah, let me repeat it. Repeat the question again. What three drivers had their pole speeds disqualified in a 1976 Daytona scandal? What three drivers? All right, we're starting to get the answers here. I'll let you guys pick that a bit longer here. So I get some water. Alrighty. What three drivers had their pole speeds disqualified in a 1976 Daytona scandal? All right, here we go. Let's get the answer. The answer, folks, are A.J. Foyt, Darrell Waltrip, and Dave Marcus. Foyt, Waltrip, Marcus, it puts on here. A.J. Foyt, Darrell Waltrip, and Dave Marcus. Those are the three. Yeah, Raymond Stock got the pole afterwards. Nicole, yep, you're very correct. Exactly. Let's see. Yeah, Nicole, you're very close on that. Yep. Marcus Petty Yarborough. Marcus is one. They all use nitrous. Speed, Petty, Denny Hamlin. There you go. Waltrip, Foyt, and Yarborough. All close. Close. DW, Kale, and Allison. Very close. Everybody's very close on that one there. I think a lot of people, I don't think anyone got that. I don't think all three. Foyt, Waltrip, and Marcus. I'm not seeing it unless you guys are. Foyt, Waltrip, and Allison. You're very close. Foyt, Waltrip, and Marcus is the correct one. And, of course, it doesn't have to be in that order. Luke Hogan, Penny Pearson. Yeah, Foyt, Waltrip. Yarborough, Allison. Marcus Petty Yarborough. See, yeah, it's hard. I wasn't sure either. It seemed like Allison seemed like it was a likely one, but not quite. Anyone who's driving for Junior Johnson. Yeah, exactly. Petty, Pearson, and Parsons. DW, Kale, and Allison. Yeah, I don't think so. DW, King, and Kale. I think it was February. I was for the 500. That sounds familiar. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, that's a very challenging one. So there you go. There we go. Well, here, you want to do one more question? We'll do one more question. That was a bit of a challenge there. Let's see. Yeah, these are too easy. Come on, these are too easy. Let's see. Alrighty. Okay, last question for the evening. Here we go. Last question for the evening, folks. What Air Force base is nestled next to Las Vegas Motor Speedway? What Air Force base is nestled next to Las Vegas Motor Speedway? Here's the last question for the night. My goodness. Here, let me see if I can do something on that. Yeah. I do apologize, folks. We have that popping up here, but I do appreciate the help on that there. Last question again is, what Air Force base is nestled next to Las Vegas Motor Speedway? Alrighty. And whoop, hang on. Alrighty. And listen, I'm seeing several ones, and it looks like a lot of you guys got it. And indeed, we're looking at covering this, the action at that track again this October. The answer is Nellis. The Nellis base, Nellis Air Force base. Nellis is the correct answer. And just about all of you guys got that one. There you go. Looks like Michael Jensen, you were the first one on that one. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in here tonight. Congratulations again to Kevin Harvick. Again, condolences again to the families of both Buddy Arrington and Neil Castles with the news this past week. Looking on doing some content on both those drivers, certainly on the channel here in the near future. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in here for tonight. Our next show is going to be after next week's action in Richmond. We'll cover the Truck Series race and the Cup Series race here in chat, and we'll go from there. In the meantime, the website is lastcar.info. Patreon is patreon.com/lastcaronbrock. And my Twitter feed is @LastCarOnBrock if you want to see some more content there. Again, thank you, everyone, for checking out the show tonight. Have a safe week, everyone. And we'll see you guys next week.